Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Esoterica. I'm Leah Eichler, and today I have the amazing opportunity to speak with Darren McKee. Darren is an author, speaker, advisor on artificial intelligence. It's the topic we all want to know more about, and the topic that, if I can speak frankly, I understand but don't really understand. And Darren is here to discuss his new book, Uncontrollable: The Threat of Artificial Superintelligence and the Race to Save the World. Hello, Darren.
Hi there. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So I have to tell you the title, if I'm not already afraid of artificial intelligence, the title really knocked me out. Let's just start with the word super intelligence, because I haven't seen that a lot. And we're writers here and readers. So tell us about, what do you mean by super intelligence?
Sure. What are we even talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, as writers, we know we're trying to communicate ideas. And I
Mhm,
thought, how to communicate complex ideas to a diverse range of people? This book really
mhm,
is for everyone, no
mhm.
technical background required. And so I believed that AI, artificial intelligence, was going to be in the news a lot,
Right.
right? And that is kind of the phrase I anchored on.
Mhm,
So, superintelligence is a way to describe artificial intelligence that's much more capable than we currently have. And in the book, I'm describing it as about equivalent to a human expert level or above, but it could
mhm.
also be far, far above. So that itself has quite a range. But if you imagine a group of human experts, superintelligence would be as capable as all of them in a general sense, and
Mhm.
then perhaps much, much more capable.
Wow. I mean, there's so much in that one sentence, and I have so many questions. Um, I do. I even wonder, when you use the word expertise and experts. I mean, do we even
Mm.
understand? Are we even touching the surface of what that means yet? I mean, what does that mean? Because we understand experts. People have doctorates
Right.
in complex topics. What do you mean by experts?
Well, this gets to there's many related questions, and so we'll
Right.
try to like unpack this. So in the book, I'm trying to communicate first that there's a very broad range of intelligence
Hmm.
in general, and I'm using intelligence in a very broad, like inclusive sense. Sometimes it's the cultural transmission of ideas over time, sort of a collective humanity capability, and also individual capabilities. And so if we sort of think back or across human history, humans used to be far less capable. That's largely because our society and our culture changed and our technology changed. I mean, many of the things we can do today that makes us very capable, it's because someone else figured it out. So we get to leverage all their efforts. And
Hmm.
somewhat similarly, as we keep going into the future, there's more and more technologies which allow humans to do more and more things. To have a wonderful video-based podcast like this or a video interview, like I don't really exactly know how it works, right? And we don't have to, right? It just works, and that's great. Someone figured it out, and now look how capable we are. And we've gone to the moon, and we've done all these things. And
Yeah.
so when you're thinking about human expertise, it is a shifting target, of course, because an expert from 10,000 years ago is going to be different from one 200 years ago, which is different than now. And it's not like we've figured out everything that exists or all knowledge. Things are in process. Learning and understanding the universe is a journey. And so expertise will itself shift. All that to say is, if you think of someone who studied in a field for 10, 20, 30 years, that's probably the expert I have in mind,
Hmm.
usually measured in a capability sense. But broadly, if you have someone with a lot of domain knowledge and that level of sophistication, the artificial superintelligence, again, as almost a metric to figure out, does this count or not? Well, are they as capable as an expert physicist, as a biologist, as an expert writer, as an expert philosopher, or an expert artist? Like whatever it is, it would
Hmm.
be, can they do intellectual tasks at that level or above?
Wow. Okay. It is fascinating. I mean, most of the writers I know have dabbled with, Chat GPT, and I mean, personally, I haven't. I'm making my own silent boycott. But not that anyone cares. Um, but I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating in that in a very short period of time, it's really integrated into society. I mean, to the extent that, yesterday, my 12-year-old daughter said, "Oh, look at this essay I put together on some very random video game that involves cookies that I've never heard of." And it was an analysis of the video game. And she wrote it with ChatGPT, and I read it. Rather, she made me read it, and it was I mean, it was it was well written, but it didn't say very much. And so that could be that there's not a lot of domain knowledge about this video game, or maybe her questions weren't right. And I thought, well, this is, I mean, you know me, I'm like, if this is it, I mean, it's not a whole big deal. But then you have things like, you know, Sports Illustrated was in the news this week because they've started using, or someone found that they had used some artificial
Yeah.
intelligence reporting, and it's a very obviously established magazine, and to the point where this the AI author had a biopic and a bio, and I mean, is that the tip of the iceberg? I mean, where do you see it in terms of writers? What is, I mean, are our biggest fears about to come true?
Mm.
What do we need to think about?
These are all great. So let's try to let's see what to address first, right? There's
I
so
know
many
so
things in
many.
here. So maybe we'll do the Sports Illustrated first, and then
Okay.
maybe how writers may or may not use these tools.
Hmm.
So with Sports Illustrated, I think it's a great example where both it has to do with AI encroaching or integrating into our lives, and
Hmm.
also how it's difficult to understand what's happened anytime, anywhere. And so my understanding of the Sports Illustrated issue is that it wasn't the print magazine, so to speak, but the
Hmm.
online website had contracted a third party to hire writers to do product reviews.
Hmm.
And Sports Illustrated, parent company, was assured that they weren't going to use AI. And then that company might have used AI.
Hmm.
Their defense, again, I'm not sure, I don't know the details, this is all hypothetical if then, but I believe the third party said, oh no, humans wrote it, but they did create fake human bios, photos, and bylines. So what exactly is fake? How much is fake? That's exactly pretty hard to say, at least from my understanding of the details at this point. But is it the case that
Hmm.
AI will be used more and more to write things? And I think the answer is a clear yes.
Hmm.
I think also it's important to think about the category of writing. For many short, brief articles, whether it's business, financial information, stocks go up and down, sports reporting, not the detailed analysis, but more like who won, was a run scored or a goal scored at a certain inning time stage, that is already being largely automated. That's nothing really new. And
Right.
so then you're like, well, what kind of writing, what type of writing, and how much will AI be involved? And then we can sort of segue to the next part, which is that I think it really is best to see these as a tool.
Right.
And in the past, you could imagine when the calculator came around, people like, well, that's cheating. And in a way it is. And that's why for very young students or kids, we say, no, they have to learn basic math. We don't want them using a calculator as soon as they start school. But to not use it at all seems really weird and ridiculous. If you had a job which involved any sort of numbers and you weren't using a calculator, it's bad, it's weird, you wouldn't do it, right? If you're trying to do some sort of spreadsheet and
It's
you
true.
don't use Excel as
Hmm.
some sort or something like it, that's
Hmm.
also odd. So I think it's going to be best to see this as a tool. And while it may be the case that certain AI or certain writers may not be fully replaced by AI,
Hmm.
writers that are using AI are more likely to succeed than writers that don't.
Correct. I mean, that's very that I think that's a really great analogy. I'd never really thought about the calculator aspect. I wouldn't think twice about using a calculator. I use my calculator all the time, and I'm not someone who's normally afraid of numbers, but I mean, if I'm doing very complex equations, it does seem like the right choice. Okay, so let's break this down. You know, I have a very, and I think, you know, people have a very vague understanding of what AI looks like now. They've dabbled in it a little bit. Writers have dabbled in it a little bit. We see it popping up in things like sports. So maybe Sports Illustrated, if that's what happened. Surely in some other writing that's already been automated. But where do we go from here? I mean, are writers who like write screenplays, or writers who write books or novels, or I mean, are they out of work? Do they start utilizing AI for their own writing and just pump out books that much faster? I mean, where do you see it going?
I think it's going to go in many places and it'll be quite messy. That's the
Hmm.
short way of putting it. So, and just to qualify, even though I said it's a useful tool, I did not use it at all when I wrote this book.
Well,
And
that's good.
yeah, by the way, so
That
there's
that would be very meta, like writing about AI with
yeah,
AI. Yeah.
Well, although every person I said I'm writing a book about AI, that oh, you should have AI write it. I'm like, yes, yes, no, I have to write it, and I thought I had to write it for a couple of reasons. One
Yeah.
is that when you write a book and then you're going to talk about the book, people expect you to be the one who knows the things because you did the work and the research to write the book. And if I didn't really write it, like, well, then you might as well have an AI on this episode instead of me, right? So that's one thing. Two, it's not quite at the capability where I think it's going to match what I could do.
Mhm.
I think we're also in almost a transitional phase as a society where right now it's kind of seen as a bit like cheating, but I do think we're
Yes.
transitioning to it as being like a tool.
Mhm.
And so I think there are a variety of reasons there. That said, as many writers know, some people do the full suite in-house. They can do writing, they can do copy editing, they can do developmental edits, they can do proofreading. But often some of us, we outsource that. We're like, okay, I'm better at this skill, someone's a professional, I'll have them do it. And of course, that's greater to employ humans in the craft of writing. But from a sort of producer point of view, I don't have the expertise to do it. I just want someone to help me. And if an AI can do the editing quickly, easily, cheaply, that's going to be very appealing to many people.
Mhm.
Uh, to in terms of like how people are going to be displaced or not, I believe the recent writer's strike related to movies and film and acting all sort of rolled into one, which is just recently resolved. They said no AI for at least the
Mhm.
next 5 years. And I think that makes a lot of sense from both perspectives to
Mhm.
sort of reach some sort of middle ground. That said, one is really hobbling themselves if they don't start to use these techniques. Again, the calculator might still be the best analogy. And it's not that the AI can give you a fantastic script right away, right out the box, right? But if you are already an expert, then you can probably use these tools very, very well. I think they seem to be best if you kind of know what the right answer should be and it helps you get there. Because
Mhm.
if you just trust the systems right now, that is not a good idea. They are not fully reliable. They will make things up. They will be very confident, regardless of whether something is true or not. And of course, this also relates, are you doing sort of nonfiction writing or fiction writing? Maybe the fiction stuff, it's even better if they're more fantastical. But if you're interested in nonfiction things, some of them will have citations, but sometimes those citations don't exist. So
Right.
as we sort of expand out over the next couple of years, I think things like systems, AI systems, will get
Mhm.
more and more capable, and they'll
Mhm.
be more and more integrated. And as you said, right now, people kind of sort of go into the world. Sometimes they use an interface, but it becomes to the point where you just something like using Google, or when you open off Microsoft Word, the grammar systems are a bit better now. Well, that's largely because of AI. And then more and more of these AI products get integrated into the natural office software, so to speak, that we already use, that they will become almost inescapable.
Hmm. I mean, okay. So, I mean, that's not super frightening yet. I mean, I think from a writer's perspective, let's go back to fiction and nonfiction. I think what most writers, as I'm sure you would agree, believe that there is an element of, human experience and emotion and, for lack of a better word, like a spirit or soul that goes into the creative process. So, I mean, I think that the underlying fear is that creativity, which is essentially the definition of what makes people human, if that can just be replicated by a robot, what does that mean about humanity? And what does that mean about the creative process? Like, are we just a bunch of, words put together? Can the human experience be distilled into a bunch of words?
That's a great, big, deep philosophical question. I think different people are going to come at this differently. I would
Yeah.
say that creativity can exist in many forms, and
Hmm.
let's not diminish the fantastical thing that is a human and the amazing
Hmm.
creations that now we've made with AI. I think you're right that most people feel that because of like the sort of lived human experience, whether there was an event, a suffering, a trauma, an excitement, whatever it is, an AI can't have that experience, therefore it can't be creative. And in some ways, that's true. But that's from the sort of personal production point of view. You have this feeling. And as far as we
Hmm.
know, AI has nothing like any of those feelings. But from a consumer point of view or an audience point of view, they want to connect with the material emotionally. And
Hmm.
in that way, if an AI can pattern match, so to speak, what a human experience is like to have deeply emotionally resonant material, then the experience of the reader, that sort of audience will have the emotional experience. So I think creativity comes in the production point of view, and then almost in the experience point of view. And for production, yes, it's very much the case humans have that domain for now. But
For now.
if we go to think of the audience, like, well, when I look at some amazing AI generated art, Yes, at the moment a human, pressed the buttons and they did some prompting and so on, but the art still has an impact on me. Even though an AI created it. And similarly, if you ask an AI like an emotional, very soulful
Mm.
exploration of what it means to be a human, you might get something that's very touching. And you could say that doesn't really count, but people are having real feelings. So I think it does count in that way. I think there's a nuance here, and I
Right.
think it's important to understand that nuance. Also, let's not diminish humans also being like neurons that fire in our brains, which lead to us putting words together and so on. So while we are a collection of biological material that can do amazing things, I would sort of say, let's not say we're just that, because that
Right.
sort of doesn't realize just how amazing it is and what we can do.
I just had a, flashback to that I must have been like a 2013 film with Joaquin Phoenix, her.
Her,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
which blew my mind at the time. And I think it seems so much more likely now that you're speaking about it and getting that experience. Um, a few things. So and we talked about fiction and nonfiction. I come from a journalism background. Um, and you mentioned that sometimes, AI currently they can cite sources that don't exist. I imagine that'll be improved, but how do you see, things like accuracy and attribution going forward, and also, lack of bias? I mean, I've just watched from the sidelines as a bunch of chatbots have been experimented with over the years, and it seems like almost immediately after they get launched, they turn out either rabidly racist or misogynist or something. I mean, how does that work? I mean, will you have a bunch of AI journalists who are left wing, right wing? I mean, how do you see that going forward?
Yeah, okay, so let's think about the attribution and sort of credibility, accountability first. I think it'd be very useful if there was like almost an informal policy amongst all authors to say whether and how much they used AI. In certain situations, I think this is already required. Like if you happen to say publish something on Amazon, did you use
Yep.
AI? And you have to click the box, right? And similarly, if you're writing an article for publication, was an
Yeah.
AI used to help edit it? Was it helped to use in content creation? I think that would be a good standard practice. Now we know people may not be entirely forthcoming, and they also may be competing with who knows who else on earth that's trying to submit material that says they haven't used AI and that they will use
Mm.
AI. With writing, it's a bit more difficult to verify some of the stuff than say images. With images, the image generators like Dolly or Midjourney, they're being able to put in stuff like digital watermarks. So invisible to the human eye, but there's almost like a secretly hidden computer code that someone else looking at that image who has the right software can easily detect, okay, this was AI generated. A human did not do
Mhm.
this. But with
Mhm.
writing, there really isn't an equivalent thing. Because you'd have to imagine, like, what would it be that someone uses like a certain consonant 6 times in a row? Like, there's a pattern that you could somehow parse out, but because they can approximate so many different types of speech, and of course, a human could just tweak 10% of the writing, then you could easily get around that. And if it was from the source, well, a human could just retype all of it into a separate document, and then there's no trace in that way. So there may be some very creative way to, I don't know, identify certain patterns, like how often the letter R is used, but I think that a human could easily circumvent that. So all that to say is I think it's going to be a sort of a very complicated, messy space about who's going to use AI, who's admitting to it, who isn't. And I just think it's better to be open about it. I didn't use AI in the book. I thought about
Mhm.
it. When I
Right.
thought like, well, for an editor, if an editor was just as good using AI, maybe I should have. Maybe if I ever write another book, which I don't want to at the moment because I just did this one. But yes, who knows? I'm open-minded about it. But I also think the reader should kind of know what they're getting into. And for some readers, it'll be, no, I only want a human to write my stuff. That's where I see
Right.
the creativity. That's what matters to me. I want to support people. And other people think, well, yeah, okay, I support this author. I've known them for a long time, and they're using AI a bit to make it better, to make it faster, to make it easier for them. Well, that might be fine as well.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It, it does strike me as a little sad. But maybe I'm, not haven't evolved to the point where I can, utilize it. Maybe I haven't fully accepted the calculator analogy
Well,
into my heart yet.
which is fair. I mean, the
Yeah.
way all of us like newness in some ways, but
Hmm.
uncertainty is often also unpleasant. And to be
Correct.
in a world where every couple of years, like I have to learn a new thing, I don't really necessarily want to. Can't I just do my
Right.
own thing? But with technology moving so quickly, it really is best to try to keep abreast at least of what's happening, what the capabilities are, and as they get better and better, to get a sort of a foot in the door, at least of practice, just play around with it. I mean, even Bing Chat, which is very free, just go to Bing Microsoft, click on Chat. You can just
Right.
play with it for half an hour. You just get a sense of what it can do and what it can't.
Hmm.
You mentioned the issue of bias, which is definitely very important. These chatbots, in a way, like they're very good comedy improv partners. In improv comedy, you work with someone and you create a scene, right? Usually suggestions from the audience, and they have a huge range of things, right? Maybe they're angry, maybe they're sad, maybe it's silly, maybe it's not. And the systems are so sophisticated because they've taken in so much data that they can kind of match whatever you're trying to get. So if you feed it a lot of negative content, whether it be racist, whether or not, it will then react to that. And so
Hmm.
sometimes people say, oh, the system tried to do this terrible thing. And you're like, well, if you look at the conversation, it was kind of led in that direction. I'm not saying the system has no responsibility because it's doing the thing, but if you want it to sound like an elderly woman from Texas, it can. If you want it to sound like a very soft-spoken, angry other type of person, it can do that too. It can do funny, it can do sad, it can do all these things. And what you
Hmm.
ask is what you're getting to some extent, and you're almost creating a partnership here. So it's hard to believe though that there's no intention behind the scenes, and I think that's another sticking point, that it really seems like this system may be trying to do something harmful, especially if it says things like you should divorce your wife and be with me. Like, well, that's very evocative, right? But it is
Right.
just, it's just pattern matching. It's just running out of script, but it can still have negative consequences in the world or seem very disturbing. An analogy that's often used, which is also in my book, is that a virus can cause a lot of harm, but it's not sophisticated. It doesn't have to have any intent to harm you, but can
Hmm.
cause harm nonetheless.
So I think, I mean, I think that's true. So it's really the human interaction that's leading on the chatbots and the AI to be vile when it happens to be vile. But I mean, can we really trust people not to be vile among, AI applications? And that seems to be the thing. Or maybe, there's a certain political leaning and there's a great discussion that everyone's going to try and feed certain content to an AI or a chatbot to lean in a certain way. I mean, is there, I want to kind of get back to like the title of the book. I mean, what are the big threats that we are looking at, and like what do we really need to worry about?
Sure. So I think it's the broader notion of like technology becoming more and more integrated into our society
Mm.
and us kind of sort of losing control over it. And in the book, I asked like, well, what's something you have full control over? It's like, well, your job? Well, no, not really. And it's like, well,
Right.
your health? Well, no. And then like, well, your family? Well, no, right? If you have kids or pets, definitely not, right? You don't control these things. And nor does a state or a society have full control over its citizens. And it shouldn't in a way. But given that, prisoners manage to escape from prison, a place specifically designed to keep them contained,
Sure.
or even North Korea, an entire state that tries to contain its citizens, people manage to get out, it sort of just highlights that you can't fully control everything. And if you think of technology and how it's integrated in our society, social media, well, no one person controls this. Of course, we all are in it together to some extent, and the internet is the same thing. So with AI,
Right.
the concern is, my expectation is that first we'll willingly give up control to more and more powerful AI systems because we want the goods and services they provide. Right? People love their phones. I use a phone. Almost everyone
Sure.
does. You almost have to. So you could choose to not have a phone, but it's almost disempowering rather than empowering. But once you do, like, well, now I need the internet. Now I need to agree to that user agreement, of course, and then the cookies, and then the tracking and stuff, and then this and that. So if you want all the extra wonderful things that make it so easy to connect with people, friends, loved ones, watching cat videos, whatever it may be, you need to give up more and more control, more and more data, more and more privacy. And most people do this willingly. That's the other thing. There's going to be a range of what
Sure.
humans do. But
Yeah.
even if, say, 95% of people feel one way, you might only need 5% of people causing problems on the periphery to cause problems for the rest of us. All I have to say is that's sort of step one. And then once we've done this over, say, a period of time of years, then it becomes very hard to disentangle, to
Hmm.
extract yourself, to shut off. So, again, from the book, can we shut off the internet? Not really. We don't
Right.
really have the actually the technical capability. The internet is kind of a distributed thing. There's underground cables, there's different servers, there's different data processing centers, but you'd also need all countries to agree pretty much to then shut it down, which is highly unlikely. And
Yeah.
then if you did shut it down, it would cause a lot of problems. Stock exchanges, medical records, like it's very much integrated into municipal systems, even how people acquire food, water, all these things. So we're not really prepared technically to shut down the internet, nor are we prepared for the social economic cost of shutting it down, given that's how a lot of global commerce functions. Similarly with AI. So that's a load of a long way to set the foundation. And then once that's the case, you can use AI. Like here are some risks that you could use it to create misinformation and have using that to destabilize elections. People are very concerned about this, especially with
That's yeah, yeah, yeah.
the U.S. election upcoming in 2024.
Mhm.
Right now, for years, we've already had the problem of deep fake pornography, where you take
Right,
someone's image and you put it on, and it's gotten better and more realistic in that way, and then worse for everyone else who's being exploited or harmed. And
right.
then could it be that AI can be used to design bioweapons? And the answer is yes, it makes it a lot easier. So if we sort of take a broad step back, AI is a very empowering device. It is amplifying things that already exist, and it empowers people. And whether those people want to do good things, they can do that with AI, because it'll also do many good things, but it can also power nefarious actors to do bad things. So it's almost like whatever you're trying to achieve, it's probably going to get easier with AI. And then if we go a bit further, could AI become a bit more, we'll say, self-aware, engage in power-seeking behavior on its own in terms of deception or manipulation of humans to acquire resources and, say, make copies of itself or edit its code? And the answer is, it seems like that's a reasonable concern. Most of this has not happened yet, but as we think about what's going to happen in the next few years, as system becomes more and more capable, we should be prepared for such concerns.
That's interesting. I wanted to end on a good note, but I do want to ask you about that point because, you know, that would infer, and perhaps I'm projecting, like sinister motivation. And we decide, I mean, we discussed earlier that these AI applications, viruses can be damaging, but they don't have the intent. Like there's no malicious intent. Do you think there can be malicious intent built into the system without human interference?
I think you could train a system to have something that we would recognize as malicious intent, but the key point is that malicious intent is not required. So while there are biological viruses, there are also computer viruses. Someone created some years ago, they still crawl the internet. People have tried to take them down, even the original creator, and they can't. And so it's not like the virus is like, haha, I'm going to affect a computer. That's not what's happening. And so similarly, an AI system, like I'm not sure if people are aware, like AI is already the world best player at poker. It also recently beat a game called Diplomacy, which is more strategy, hidden information. It has AI systems have in testing or simulated situations displayed deception and other sorts of power-seeking behavior. And it's really important to not wait until after it happens. That's the thing. People are often very reactive. It'd be very hard to even have this conversation before ChatGPT came out just about a year ago.
Mhm.
But we have to start thinking about the what ifs. Okay, if it
Yeah.
takes multiple years to address a problem, we should really be thinking now and put things in place, even in an if then scenario. And that's why there's all these recommendations about what we can actually do about this.
Mhm. Well, this has been so informative. I'm still frightened, but very informative. It maybe if we can end on a positive note. I mean, there's a lot of writers and readers that have approached me about this interview. So tell me, like, what's one good thing that can come out of AI for writers?
There's many wonderful things, and yes, it's a bit more negative, but I think the good things almost sell themselves. So I think
Okay.
it's really, as I said, very empowering. If you happen to have a skill where, say, you're very creative, but you're not that great at grammar, the AI can help you. Maybe you are good at grammar, your spelling is not as good, the AI can help you. So if you want to create things in this world, and many people have wanted to, they're just not quite capable. Now they can. And with AI, like, I have terrible artistic skills, can't draw, can't paint anything else, and now with AI I can kind of create the stuff I have in my mind, at least to an extent, like, oh, this makes me proud. So if you are a creative person, it's almost like your opportunity space just increased dramatically.
Okay, well that's a good point. That makes me feel a little. Maybe I could try some art. I'm terrible at art. Um, I have a question for you from the audience. Uh, Hi, Darren. Thank you for the fabulous interview. I'm curious if you have thoughts about best practices for using AI, specifically ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, ethically in writing today. In other words, ways of using AI to help draft in a way that's helping us draft without usurping our role as writers.
I think that relates to that issue of transparency.
Yeah.
So as long as you might be, if you're willing to use it, I think that's great. It's important to play around with it. Even if you decide not to use it, you should know what's out there. But I think it's just being honest with your either your, I don't know, whatever publication you're with or your audience, saying like, okay, look, I had an idea. It helped with whatever it did. Did it help with the outline? Did you have the outline? Then you did the hardcore writing and it did some editing. I think that's mainly what it is. And then different people will feel certain things are more ethically appropriate than others. And I think you'll kind of find your audience there. Now, if you said, I came with an idea, it did the whole thing, that's probably not going to work for most people. But maybe you'll
Right,
find again some small corner of the internet, it's like, this is great quality content. I don't care who did it. But for most
right.
people, they want to know, in what way did you use this? And that's kind of a code of honor, I would say, that is probably best for people to have for themselves and then to be transparent with their audience.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to transparency and honesty. Things that, humans generally aren't very good at, but let's hope for the best. So thank you so much, Darren McKee. This has been a wonderful interview again. Darren is the author. I'm going to get the book up. Darren is the author of Uncontrollable, The Threat of Artificial Superintelligence and the Race to Save the World. And go buy the book. And Darren, thank you so much for all of your help and insight here.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. All right. We'll speak soon. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.